Continue. Okay. This is a very great honor and also with some gravity that I'm going to. This meeting takes place in a very sensible time, and I want you all to thank you all for your participation today. It's a virtual ceremony, but because of COVID, we cannot hold a physical ceremony, but it was very important to gather today to pay tribute to Samuel Paty, the teacher who was tragically killed last Friday, October 16, by a terrorist in the town near Paris. Samuel Paty was a 47-year-old teacher. A few days before his death, he gave a course on freedom of expression, and this was it's a normal part of the curriculum of the school in France. He has been doing it every year, and this year he was killed shortly after he gave this course. Because he did this very class on freedom of expression, which is a course where you explain our constitutional right of freedom of expression. You explain the principle of secularism, which is one of the bases of the French Republic. This is where you explain also the freedom that we have in France to believe religiously or not to believe. This is the core of the secularism. Samuel Paty was a very passionate teacher. He had the ambition to open doors, like all the teachers in France, to open doors for the children to develop their critical thinking and to build their free minds. His barbaric assassination caused an immense emotion in France. Because he was killed during a terrorist attack, but also because a teacher was killed during a terrorist attack. As the president did today during the ceremony at the Sorbonne, which just took place, I'm not going to speak about the facts that have led to the tragic events and the tragic killing of Samuel. I'm not going to talk about the responsibility, talking about the role of social medias. An investigation is underway, and I can assure you that justice will take its course. I'm not going to talk also about our strategy to fight the Islamist radicalization, Islamist terrorism, Islamist separatism, as the president qualified it a few days before the death of Samuel Paty. I'm not going to talk about to speak about our strategy to fight the radicalism, to the importance of laïcité, which is the secularism that I just mentioned. I would just focus on the critical role and the crucial role played by our teachers in our society. And this is why the death of Samuel Paty left such an emotion in France, and why since Friday there has been so many gatherings, so many tributes paid to Samuel Paty. This is a tribute to him. This is a tribute to his family, to his child. He was father of a 5-year-old boy. But this is also a tribute to the role that the teachers played in our society and in our republic, and the critical role that they play for our republic to keep its values as liberté, égalité, fraternité, which is freedom, equality, and brotherhood, that is well known. The French Republic was built around its schools. Schools are the place where we learn how to fight ignorance, where we learn how to fight radicalism, where we learn how to build our critical thinking. This is where we learn how to accept the others and to accept their differences. This is why it was decided to honor the memory of Samuel Paty in the University of the Sorbonne, which is the very symbol of the spirit of enlightenment of les Lumières in our country, France. To conclude, I would like to quote President Macron, just to quote some words that he mentioned during today's ceremony. So I'm going to quote him right now. Samuel Paty was the victim of the disastrous conspiracy of stupidity, lies, amalgamation, hatred of the other. Samuel Paty became the face of the Republic, of our desire to break terrorists, to reduce Islamists, to live as a community of free citizens. In our country, the face of our determination to understand, to learn, to continue is held today by the teachers. So once again, I thank you all for the participation, and I will give the floor to a few participants that I really welcome today. The first one, so it will be, we will alternate between teachers representing of the teachers community and representative of religious organization. So I start by Michel, and Michel has two hats today. She's a teacher, but she's also an elected member of the French people in New York. So Annie, I give you the floor. Thank you. And just yeah, your mic is off. The microphone.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Hi. So, as Michel le Consul said, I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for 49 years in France by French National Education, and in Mamaroneck at FASNY, French American School of New York, for 26 years, and now in Right Country School as a French teacher, but teaching American kids. Of course, I'm really shocked by the way Samuel lost his life. Samuel was 47 years old, and teaching history was also teaching moral and civics, and he was teaching to 8th grade students, 13 years old students. And the attacker, I wanted to say, I mean, was only 18 years old, the age of my students. I'm teaching 12th grade. And I'm really feeling terrible, not only as a teacher, but also for my students. As you know, 18 years old is pushed to kill somebody else. So Samuel was recently showing cartoons depicting the Prophet Muhammad during discussion about freedom of speech in his class, and a move that prompted threats against him. As I said, I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for many years, and I'm shocked that nothing and nobody will have been able to stop this. Nothing, as the freedom to practice religion has been recognized since 1905, when the law of the separation of the church and state came into effect. Far from being a weapon against religion, this text return all religion to the private sphere and establish state secularism in the public sphere. The French state does not favor any one religion and guarantees their peaceful coexistence in respect of the laws and principles of the Republic. And nobody, it is shocking that this teacher received threats from the parents during the week preceding his assassination. And why did the administration of the school, what did the administration of the school do? Apparently, we don't know, it's under investigation, but this assassination happened. And it is why I think that it is very important to show solidarity on national cohesion, as said National Education Minister Jean-Michel Blanquer, calling on everyone to support the teachers. Teachers need support. But I have learned through experience that teachers do not need to illustrate freedom of expression with blasphemy, which can shock even if it is legal. I taught for 11 years in the region of Saint-Étienne. 75% of my students were Muslim, and I was teaching social justice, moral and civic education through French 19th century literature. And I was careful not to shock them when it was, by the way, already very difficult to teach as a woman in a high school in this context. So I'm again very really shocked by the gruesome assassination of a colleague, a teacher who did his job. And I do care for my students, my colleagues and parents, and of course, with Samuel's family. Voilà.
Merci beaucoup, Annie. Many thanks to you. I will now pass the floor to Dr. Isma Chaudhary, who is the chair of the Islamic Center of Long Island. Dr. Isma, Dr. Chaudhary, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for this invite, and I'm honored to be here with you as we gather today to honor the life of Samuel Paty. Good evening, everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. May the blessings of God Almighty be with all of us. I offer my sincere condolences and prayers to the family and friends of Samuel Paty. This gruesome, horrific criminal act of violence is not sanctioned or permitted by the Islamic traditions, teachings, or ideology. The most important and valuable right which Islam has recognized is sanctity of life and justice. I'll quote Quran chapter 5, verse 2. Do not let your hatred of a people incite you to aggression. Islam encourages freedom of speech and dialogue. And if there are differences in opinions or no resolution is reached, Islam totally promotes to each their own thoughts and beliefs. The ideals of equality, freedom, and compassion are weaved in the fabric of Quran and the tradition of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. The Quran guides us to be each other's keepers. Chapter 49, verse 13, I'll share with you. O mankind, we created you from a single pair of male and female and made you into nations and tribes that you may know each other and not that you may despise each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of God is the one who's most righteous. The ideals of equality, freedom, unity, and aspiring towards common good are the universal messages of all the traditions, religious or not, and all the ethical denominations that we have. A loss of human life is a collective loss of humanity. One of the tenets of Islam is to believe in all the prophets, all the ideologies and the scriptures revealed to these prophets. From Adam to Noah, from Abraham to Moses to Jesus, peace and blessings be upon all of them. And it's incumbent upon the Muslims to have respect and honor for all the traditions. The Islamic principles derived from the Quran and the teachings of Prophet Muhammad emphasizes on the sanctity of life and honor for all humanity, irrespective of their ethnic or religious affiliations or choices. We learn from the life of Prophet Muhammad that during his life in Mecca, he and his companions endured tyranny, oppression, and every form of harassment. And instead of retaliation in kind, he treated his oppressors with kindness, compassion, and peace. Quran guides us that whoever takes a life, it will be as if they have killed the whole humanity. And whoever saves a life, it will be as if they have saved the whole humanity. I pray that may God grant us the wisdom and the strength to love each other, each and every human being as prescribed to us by divine scriptures. I pray that may we open our hearts and our minds and become each other's keepers. May our dealings with each other be inspired by the virtues of empathy and love. And may every life that we have lost to oppression, injustice, and hatred inspire us to love and honor each other. May we embrace our differences with compassion and respect. Amen. Thank you.
Many thanks, Dr. Chaudhry, for your very strong remarks. I will now pass the floor to Pierre Lagode. Pierre, vous pouvez commencer. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Good afternoon. I'm Pierre Lagode, teacher of History and Geography at the Lycée Français de New York. I apologize for this, but for such a complex subject, I prefer to speak in French. À 9h ce matin, une minute de silence a été respectée au sein de notre lycée, online mais aussi en présentiel, car nous avons la chance, dans le contexte actuel, de pouvoir accueillir nos élèves. Cette minute a été précédée de la lecture de quelques mots présentant le contexte de cet hommage à notre collègue qui est mort en faisant simplement son travail, notre travail. Cette minute a été respectée par tous avec beaucoup d'émotion. Elle a permis aussi de mettre de nouveau en valeur justement les valeurs de notre lycée, qui sont aussi les valeurs de l'école de la République française. La défense des libertés fondamentales et notamment la liberté d'expression, ainsi que l'ouverture et la tolérance. Pour transmettre ces valeurs, le rôle éducatif de l'école et des enseignants est évidemment fondamental. Ce rôle passe par la transmission de savoir, mais aussi de plus en plus de savoir-être. Ce rôle est d'autant plus important dans un contexte actuel, hélas marqué par la division et la conflictualité, tant aux États-Unis qu'en France d'ailleurs. Samuel Paty était, comme vous le savez, professeur d'histoire-géographie. Son assassinat a notamment pour but de nous faire peur et de nous censurer, mais cela n'arrivera pas. Cela n'arrivera pas car notre quotidien et notre vocation sont de transmettre les valeurs de tolérance et de liberté, grâce au respect de nos programmes. L'histoire et la géographie offrent des clés pour mieux affronter les défis actuels. En 5e, par exemple, pas plus tard qu'hier, j'ai enseigné à mes élèves les contacts et les échanges qui ont eu lieu durant le Moyen-Âge autour de la Méditerranée, entre la civilisation chrétienne et la civilisation arabo-musulmane, afin de montrer que certes, ces contacts étaient parfois conflictuels, mais qu'ils pouvaient également reposer sur le vivre ensemble, comme en Sicile ou au sud de l'Espagne, par exemple. J'ai aussi, il y a peu de temps, enseigné à mes premières les Lumières, qui ont permis l'affirmation de la raison par rapport à l'obscurantisme. Les professeurs d'histoire géo en France et au lycée français de New York enseignent aussi l'éducation morale et civique, qui repose sur 3 finalités: le respect d'autrui, la construction d'une culture civique et l'acquisition et le partage des valeurs de la République. Parmi ces valeurs, outre celle déjà mentionnée, celle de la laïcité est fondamentale. Elle repose sur la liberté de chacun de croire ou de ne pas croire, mais aussi sur la neutralité de l'État et sur la séparation entre les cultes et la République française. Cette conception de la laïcité à la française est parfois source de confusion, d'approximation, de débat. En France, par exemple, déjà, où une conception radicale et ferme s'oppose à une conception plus libérale, mais aussi aux États-Unis, où le contexte historique et social engendre parfois une incompréhension mutuelle. C'est en ce sens que nous avons pris l'initiative au lycée d'organiser bientôt une rencontre afin d'œuvrer à une meilleure entente. Et je laisse le soin à mon collègue Arthur de vous en parler également. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pierre, and thank you, Monsieur le Consul Général, for this invitation. It's really an honor to be with you here this evening in order to express our homage to Samuel Paty. And on behalf of all the teachers at the Lycée Français New York, I'd like to express our deepest empathy with all the citizens of France and all the colleagues, members of Éducation Nationale, for the loss that we all feel and the shock and the trauma that was experienced on last Friday with the tragic death of Samuel Paty. As a New Yorker and having survived now 2 terrorist attacks, I think I understand that the best way to overcome these challenges is through solidarity and through fostering mutual respect. And by upholding those values is the best way we can honor the memory of Samuel Paty and continue honoring him every day through the work we do with our students. I'd like to come back to some of what Pierre mentioned through the specificities of teaching at the Lycée Français, where have the privilege of teaching for the past 14 years. Our students on a daily basis navigate the cultural differences between France, the United States, and perhaps many other cultures as well. And so helping them to do that, we put an emphasis on developing their intercultural competencies. And when I think back to the pioneering work of Alexis de Tocqueville in Democracy in America, this French thinker and social writer observed in the 1830s that the strength of American democracy came from its religious pluralism. And this is a value that we tend to uphold in the United States today, and we find essential to the thriving of democratic values and the American Republic. At Lycée Français de New York, we strive to embrace diversity in all of its forms, in religious, but as well as political diversity, and creating a space where our students can use their esprit critique to evaluate different arguments, different belief systems, and have that liberty to believe or not to believe in these systems and form their own judgments. And that's a great responsibility that devolves to us, their teachers, as educators. When I think about Tocqueville's reflections and remarks, I think to the founding fathers of the United States, who had the prescience to put on the same footing the liberty of religion and the liberty of expression in the First Amendment to our American Constitution. We uphold this value and impart it to our students in the enseignement moral et civique, but also in the programs we try to encourage them to participate in. We've had the privilege, thanks to the support of the Consul Général, of having esteemed guests from France address our students. Most recently, Rabbi Delphine Orvilleur, and last year, Islamic scholar Rachid Benzine. These two co-authors of Mille et une façons d'être juif et musulman helped our students understand that it's important to overcome the cliché and the stereotypes that sometimes are applied to religious groups based on fringe or fanatical segments of their religion, but also it's important for us to denounce extremism in all of its forms in order to call it out and to maintain a respectful democratic space for all of our citizens, which is the basis of democracy. For years now, the Lycée has partnered with the Tannenbaum Center for Interreligious Understanding to develop Days of Understanding. This is a program that spans from maternelle through the middle school, and it encourages our students to have interfaith conversations, to share their religious identity and also share their lack of a religious identity in order to construct a school community of equals that's based on mutual respect, tolerance, and vivre ensemble. Last but not least, I want to pay tribute to Samuel Paty. This is a man who died in the service of his mission, fulfilling it in the service of his students. There's no greater tribute we can pay to a man than to keep that memory and living within us and sustain it in our mission as educators. I thank you all.
Merci beaucoup. Many thanks for these two accounts from two teachers of the French lycée here in New York. Thank you very much. I pass now the floor to David Harris, CEO of the American Jewish Committee, who is also a great friend of France. Mr. Harris, you have the floor. Mr. Harris, we cannot see you or hear you. Yes, I can see you now. I cannot hear you. Maybe the microphone is not activated. No, I cannot hear you. The microphone, you need to open your microphone. You need to open the audio on your screen. So you're connected now, I think. Can you speak? No, it doesn't work. No. Okay. So I will give the floor to Reverend Monsignor Joseph Lamorte, and now and after that we will revert to David Harris. So Reverend, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Consul General. Good evening, everybody. I'm here representing His Eminence Timothy Cardinal Dolan. Cardinal Dolan, of course, is the Archbishop of New York, and he wanted very much to be here tonight, asked me to come in his place. Tonight, he's at a prayer service for Armenia. In fact, just left our residence now to go over there. I am the Vicar General, so after the Cardinal comes me, and as the Cardinal is the visible face of the church in New York, I sort of stay home and take care of business, make sure that the trains are running. I was very, very moved listening to the people who spoke before me. I too would like to offer the sympathy of the Archdiocese of New York to the family and colleagues of Samuel Paty and all of the citizens of France. I know last year, Mr. Consul General, your predecessor was here when we mobilized a great effort to try to financially respond to the fire at the cathedral in Notre Dame. So we've had some connection there too. Very personally speaking, I've been a priest for almost 40 years, but a catalyst for me into the priesthood were the 4 years that I spent as a Catholic school teacher. And it was that experience that encouraged me to explore a vocation to the priesthood. So my years in the classroom, especially in the Catholic school, were very, very important because of the basic tenets of religious freedom, what we embrace and what's so important to us. It might be helpful to recall earlier examples of extremism in this world in which we live, a terribly troubled world. I know that we were very disturbed by the murder of Father Jacques Hamel, who was killed by Islamic extremists while he was celebrating Mass 4 years ago in a diocese in France. And it was Pope Francis himself who said of Father Hamel and others that they are murdered and tortured and imprisoned and slaughtered because they refuse to renounce their faith and deny Jesus Christ. Such an important concept, which is necessary for all of us to ponder. This attack on anyone over religious differences, whether Christian or Jewish or Muslim or any faith or no faith at all, is really an attack on every one of us. We like to think that we live in a civilized society, and this form of hatred and violence must end for the good of everybody. We're blessed that in this country we live with freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and they are enshrined as the First Amendment to our Constitution. There's a reason why both are present. Both are essential to who we are as human beings, and we have to defend that right to think and believe and speak and act on our own beliefs. So again, our condolences, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Many thanks, Reverend, and many thanks also to the Cardinal. Please convey our thanks to the Cardinal. And I pass now the floor. Mr. Harris, are you?
Can you hear me now,
Yes,
Consul General?
that's perfect.
Oh, good.
Excellent. All right, so you have the floor.
I want to begin by thanking you, Consul General, for organizing this event and inviting my participation. I speak this evening not only on behalf of the American Jewish Committee, which has had a century-long relationship with France, but I speak as the son of two refugees who came to France. My mother arrived in France as a refugee from communism in 1929. She did all her schooling in France. She was a graduate of the Lycée in Paris before the Nazis arrived. My father arrived in France as a refugee in 1938 from Austria. And I mention this because both of them understood as refugees to France that there was a social contract between them as newcomers to France who have been given the opportunity for a new life, and an embrace of France as a nation and French values. They both had come from totalitarian societies. They both quickly understood the principles of liberty, of equality, of fraternity, and of laïcité, or secularism, as it's often translated in English. And they understood that this was now their responsibility as well. I follow the story of Samuel Paty, therefore, through the prism also of my mother, who had been taught by earlier Samuel Patys, and as an American citizen who has had a lifelong connection to France. I also followed this story, sadly, to Father Lamorte's earlier comment, as having attended too many funerals and too many memorial services from Toulouse to Paris for other victims of Islamist terrorism. In this case, Jewish victims. I also come to this evening as someone who flew to Copenhagen in 2005 after a Danish newspaper had published caricatures and in turn triggered attacks, physical attacks, violent attacks in Denmark and elsewhere as an expression of solidarity with Denmark. I want to stress that in Denmark, had I been the newspaper publisher, I would not have published those cartoons. But I understood, as a product of enlightenment, that part of our responsibility, what my mother and father had learned, and what I learned subsequently, was that we must stand for and defend our values, core values, foundational values, even when those values can sometimes seem objectionable to us individually, whether as Muslims, as Jews, as Christians, as atheists, that these form the foundation of our societies and distinguish us from other societies. And therefore, I continue to believe, Consul General, that for us, it is indeed, yes, of course, about mourning for Samuel Paty. Sadly, tragically, all of the mourning will not bring him back to life. The question, therefore, is, number one, will the murderer and the accomplices succeed in intimidating others, other teachers, to back away from teaching those core values, even if they may at times seem impossible to understand? And it's inspiring for me to hear the teachers on this call say, we will not back away. We will not back away. Secondly, it seems to me that our nations must not be apologetic or squeamish in defending those core values that derive from the Enlightenment and that distinguish democracies from tyrannies, autocracies, and totalitarian societies. And three, and finally, I believe that this is a moment for both the internal inventorying of each of our religion and faith groups. After Yitzhak Rabin was murdered in Israel, there were those who wanted to say he can't be Jewish because Jews don't allow such wanton murder. But he was, and he was a product of at least a segment of the Jewish world. And we Jews, therefore, had to engage in a moral reflection on what went wrong in a part of that world. So too, it seems to me, as an exponent of interfaith relations, and the American Jewish Committee has been engaged intensively, deeply in interfaith relations with both the Christian and Islamic worlds. Other religions, including Islam and Christianity, must ask the same questions again and again when something goes wrong, because something has gone wrong. This is not the first such murder, gruesome murder, a beheading. This is not the first. Will it be the last? So even as we look within our own civilizations and societies, Consul General, all of us who are committed to defending those core values, those foundational values that define our societies, both in France and the United States, must also move closer to each other, must wrap our arms around each other, at least in a post-COVID world, and say that we will stand as a community of conscience and we will defend those values together as pluralistic societies, because the tragedy of Samuel Paty teaches us that lives are at stake, and ultimately nations are at stake as well. Destinies are at stake. I mourn the memory of Samuel Paty. I commit on behalf of the American Jewish Committee to redouble our efforts here in Europe, within our faith, across faiths, and across no faiths, to stand together as that community of conscience.
Many thanks, Mr. Harris, for your very strong comments and very deep comments. I will now pass the floor to Gaëtan Bruel, who is the cultural counselor of the French Embassy. And Gaëtan, among many responsibilities, supervises all the French schools in the US. So Gaëtan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Yesterday, we at the embassy, through my colleague Olivier Boisson, who is the head of the French schools department within the cultural services, we brought together the directors of the 50 lycées français in the United States and Canada, as we do twice a month. Unlike the lycée français in New York, each of these schools is now in mourning over the cowardly assassination of Samuel Paty, targeted only because he wanted to teach his students freedom of expression. In turn, I can testify to the emotion that is currently gripping the entire French educational community in the United States, but also to its gratitude for the many messages of solidarity it has received. I would like to say that this educational community is deeply rooted on both sides of the Atlantic. There is no difference between the school of Conflans-Sainte-Honorine in the suburbs of Paris, where this terrorist attack took place, and our schools in New York and across the United States, because they are the same teachers who teach the same programs with the same ambition to provide our students with the resources to understand the world as it is and to make it better by their future commitments. Today, we are all affected, and perhaps we are a little defeated because no tribute can atone for the death of a man. But starting tomorrow, we will continue this work of teaching, of tolerance, of vigilance, of supporting our teachers. We will not rest in the fight against violence, against intolerance, against obscurantism. In this work, I believe that we can take strength in a symbol and a guide, which I want to mention in closing. The symbol is really this tribute, which bring together, at the invitation of the Consul General of France, professors, an elected official, a teacher herself, and great representatives of several religious denominations, speaking with one voice in powerful words. Thank you to each and every one of you for that. And finally, I believe that we have a guide, Samuel Paty, because even if we all feel like teachers today, we are discovering that Samuel Paty was truly unique. He was passionate, he was demanding, he was generous. And as President Macron said today at the Sorbonne, he was one of those professors we never forget. And as a community of conscience, to quote David Harris' word, we will not forget him. Thank you.
Many thanks, Gaëtan. We have a bit of time if some participants want to react, to give some comments on this issue. I can open the floor. The things I don't see, it's my technical team who can see who is asking. So if you want to take the floor, just lift your hand and we'll give you the floor. Or just start talking, and I think you will come automatically. Feel free really to speak. I'll wait 2 minutes. If nobody reacts within 2 minutes, I will just close the discussion.
For the lycée, good evening to all. From the Lycée Français de New York, from all of us, thank you very much for putting this together. I think the reaction at the lycée and everywhere is one of deep shock, and this conversation, the conversation you put together is the beginning of the work we are going to be continuing to do as we recover and absorb the news and its impact on everyone at the lycée and way beyond, on the students as well. So it's deep work that needs to be done, and we are grateful for your showing us the way. Thank you.
Many thanks, Evelyn, for these words. The floor is still open to anybody who wants to take it. So maybe I will, if nobody interrupts me within the next minute, I'm just going to close the discussion by thanking all the speakers. We heard very strong words. Thanks to Annie, Isma, Arthur, Pierre, Gaëtan, David, and Father. And I think I don't forget Monsignor, I don't forget anybody. It was, I heard a lot of emotions, but also a strong determination to continue acting for our values, for the values of the French Republic, and for the teachers just simply doing their job, which is just teaching, which is maybe the most fantastic job in the world. I think we all remember our teachers when we were younger, and teachers play such a role in building the personalities of our personalities and our opinions. That I think the best tribute, as Gaëtan put it, is just to follow the guide and to follow the way showed by Samuel Paty. So I really thank everybody. I know that there will be also national tribute in the schools on the 2nd of November, because now the schools in France are on holidays. And I just once again thank everybody for your participation. And I'm looking forward to meeting you in some other occasions. Many thanks. And au revoir, bonne soirée et à très bientôt. Bye bye.
Merci beaucoup.
Au revoir.